We've known each other for quite a while. Please welcome him to the stage, as well as Tom Stevenson, CEO and founder of, how do you pronounce that?
Pynea.
Pynea.
Yeah.
I was going to go P. No, I thought that would be
Yeah,
good.
Latin for pine cone.
You guys feeling all right, Hung? How's the show going for you so far?
Hey, listen, RecFest is my favorite event for a reason. It's fantastic, mate.
Thanks for the weather. I'm glad you could coordinate some nice weather for us.
Happy to deliver it, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hung's the man. He's going to take this over. Let's give it up for him and Tom.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I was intrigued by this title, and the reason why I said immediately yes, I wanted to participate, is we talk a lot about AI, we talk a lot about the future of talent, but let's explore exactly what we mean by this. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with Tom. Tom, it might be worthwhile for you to just spend like 60 seconds, introduce yourself, like who are you, what it is you do?
Yeah, so my name's Tom Stevenson. I've, for most of my life, run an innovation agency. And then I saw something in hiring that I didn't think worked particularly well, and I set out to solve it. And that's what I'd really like to talk to you today. I hear a lot of conversations about AI and how smart AI is, but if we all have AI and we all have the same subscription, the real advantage is humans, and that's what I really want to talk about today.
Yeah, fantastic. You set up a tech business. Can you explain to us when you realized, like, was there a moment when you realized, okay, I actually have to do something about this problem?
Yeah. So when I was running my innovation agency, we grew quite quickly. And the whole point of an innovation agency is to find the thing that nobody else sees. So I needed to hire somebody to take on more clients. And I made one of the worst mistakes in my life where I hired somebody from a very big company with 20 years experience. And what I found when I got them is they had 20 years of experience in solving the same problem over and over again, and it really didn't work. And so I needed to put the job advert out again. I set up my ATS, and I thought this time I'm going to apply for my own job. I never got an interview, and I never actually even made it past the screening phase. And I thought this was quite funny, so quite a few of my friends are founders, and I thought, well, why not try it with them too? And they never got through their own screening phase either. And this is when I realized that I think something is fundamentally broken. And that thing that's broken, now that we have AI, I think is only going to be amplified.
Yeah, it's really interesting, particularly on the founder side, because founders are often coming from quite an unusual trajectory career-wise, isn't it? And I wonder whether a lot of the jobs that we create, maybe the AIs that we train, actually we've trained them to anticipate a certain trajectory, whereas actually maybe the most talented people are coming from a different type of way of getting to where they are. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So tell us about sort of what the problem with that record of achievement, a CV, is. I mean, what do you think is the main issue for us basing our decisions on that document?
Well, the interesting thing about a CV or a degree or experience is that no first-time founder has a degree in being a founder. In fact, they have no experience in being a founder before they become a founder. They have a different set of skills that is just really to figure something out. And what I found with the CV, very much based on prior experience, on qualifications, is that it's very much built off the academic system, which is the idea of knowledge. And what's interesting about this is that if we applied this to business, then we'll go and find the most successful company in our sector, copy everything they do, and expect it to do well. But that never happens. Actually, innovation comes from questioning the very knowledge we're taught in the first place in order to find an advantage. And I think it's interesting about founders because I saw something from the World Economic Forum on the skills of the future. And I looked at them and I was like, are these really skills of the future? Or are they all just soft skills? Because the idea of resilience being a soft skill I've always found hilarious. The idea of empathy being a soft skill. And all of these are the things that I think founders, great employees, the best people that I've particularly worked with, all have these characteristics. And I think this is something that we can't really measure from just a past set of experiences put down on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, the things that you're describing there, I oftentimes don't like the term skill attached to those terms, because for me, a skill is proximate to task, and it is something you can measure, and it is something you can get better or worse at, and what have you. But something like resilience, for me, strikes me as like a trait.
It is, yeah.
Or a characteristic, a personality trait, and it's like, okay, can you really measure that? How much of it are you born with? Maybe you can develop it, but under what circumstances? So those things, when I see them on a CV, they do jar out at me a little bit, because it's like the CV is like a record of achievements. That is like, okay, here's the history of this person, but then where does the resilience is a word on the page, but I don't see that map into the trait I'm looking for.
Well, what's interesting about resilience is that what you say record of achievement, resilience is kind of like a record of having a difficult life. Because the more difficult challenges that you've come and you've managed to move past, the more you build that resilience. And I think it's quite interesting. We talk about talent acquisition, but we then measure everything as a skill. Even knowledge is a skill. You can read and read and read until eventually it comes in. And I think talent is something where you're naturally good at something. And I think actually developing those things and letting those things thrive becomes more important than ever. But even on experience can be bad things, like that you've overcome. And I think that's where you really build character from. And I'll give you an example of one of the developers I had who had no skill in the programming language that I needed to build for the next part of the app. Within a month, he's my best engineer in that code language. That's got nothing to do with knowledge. It's got nothing to do with skill. It's all to do with mindset and his capability. He will not stop until he's the best at something. And I think we need to look for this more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, a question for the audience, actually. When you think about your hiring for someone for your core team, someone who's really like close to you, proximate to your work, would you hire for experience or would you hire for aptitude? Would you hire for attitude? Someone who's got a proper give it a go type person. I think all of us could say we're going to go for that rather than someone who's got X amount of experience on.
Yeah.
It's interesting we don't build the recruitment around it. We build it around a CV that's on.
You make a really interesting point, though. So there's something that I've done with hundreds of founders, talent managers, and I'd like to maybe do it with the audience now, if that's okay, which is think of the best person that you've ever worked with. This does also work for the worst person you've ever worked with, but I promised my head of marketing I'm going to keep it positive today. But I want you to think of the best person you've ever worked with, and I'd like you to think of the words you would use to describe that person. Everyone got it? Now, what's interesting, there is not one time that I have done this that any person has said, James was amazing, he had 20 years experience, he went to this school, he used to work at this company. We say that James solved the problem before I got there. James never gave up. James saw opportunities where nobody else saw. And so it's very interesting when we think of the best people that we do go to these character traits. And when I used to do a lot of consultancy, I found something very strange. There was always at least one person, you'll probably know this in your own organization, who was right at the top and integral to the company. And I cannot describe how they got there. When I look at the CV, they darted about, they moved about, they had different roles, different experiences. And so I find it very interesting that when we talk about the best people, we go to that character, that mindset. When we go to assess hiring, we go very much on the skill. So I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny here, Tom, is that when you mention this, like, can you think of somebody that you worked with that was an obviously brilliant candidate and colleague? I'm sure all of us immediately had a vision in mind as to who that person was. It was very, very obvious. It's Jane, it's Patty. It's like, those are names that come out of my own history without thinking about them. Because these people were just absolutely, they're going to get the job done. It's almost like it doesn't matter what the domain was. If I was to throw a task at that person, they would just completely own it, over-deliver. And what were those qualities? Is like, we didn't actually assess for them at interview. We were lucky, in my experience with those two people, that we kind of accidentally hired them. We weren't looking for that capability. So yeah, super interesting. Okay, so I think I know what the answer to the question is, but I'll pose it anyway. Modern ATSs, such as they are, what do you reckon are the main problem with current ways ATSs are set up?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with what I think is the absolute main problem. And I will say that if I used an ATS system for dating, I actually wouldn't have ever dated my girlfriend, to be honest. I've been with her for 13 years. And I think there's a problem within ATS systems, is the fact that we have the world's best CV writing software being reviewed by the world's best ATS system, all based on keywords. So I'd argue we're not finding the best talent, we're actually finding the best keyword strategists. And so I find it quite interesting that at that stage, and I think this problem exists because it seems within hiring there's an obsession about operational efficiency. How many people have we screened? How many people have come through? And I think it shouldn't. I think we should be looking less at efficiency and more at effectiveness, because for me the biggest waste of time in hiring is when somebody's been put through to an interview and you know after 5 minutes it's not a right fit. And let's face it, the candidate probably knows you're not a right fit either. And I think this is where people have said, well, you can't make a gut feel hire. I agree with that, but I don't want to devalue all of where the gut comes from, because that comes from your experience, it comes from what you've seen, and it comes from energy that you get in the room. And so when you're getting something through an ATS system, yes, you can build things in your hiring process to find character later, but that's providing the people with the right character got through in the first place. And that's very much what we've set out to solve within our company at Pynea.
Yeah, and I know the audience immediately had a sharp intake of breath when you were saying, listen, gut feel is important. Because we as a function in TA have kind of railed against gut instinct. It's not data-driven decision, it's cognitive bias, we have to get rid of it. And in fact, we're very keen to lecture hiring managers that give us the feedback on gut feel, aren't we? Hiring manager rejects the candidate saying, listen, I just didn't feel right, we're down on that person like a ton of bricks. And we say, no, you got to give a scorecard, you got to go do this, this, and this. And we have them perform a humiliation ritual, basically, in order for them to get through the process. Now, I'm going to try and square the circle a little bit, Tom, so it's just a bit of a deviation. But I'm very much pro-gut feel, but I'm anti-bias.
Yes.
And I think the way in which we solve that problem is that we need to locate where we put the gut feel. So in other words, we can't put it at the front of the funnel. That means looking at a CV and saying no, yes, no, maybe on a CV scan, which we know, as you said, is a poor signal. Gut feel becomes more important the deeper you go into the process, particularly your last conversation with that person. That's when you need to listen because you've already captured a lot of information down through the pipe. The second thing I would also argue for gut feel is if you're a domain expert making a decision on something you're expert at, such as does this person fit within the team that I manage, you're an expert at managing that team, then I think your gut feel comes back in because you've got a little bit more knowledge as to how that works. And the third thing is related to that second point, which is, do you have stake in the game? So in other words, does it matter if the decision is right or wrong to you personally? Yeah. And then you're not casually making a yes-no based on your instinct. But your instinct cannot be ignored, quite right. I'm calling it human-evolved decision-making. Can't ignore it.
Well, I think a lot of this is the founder's fault. And I'm a founder because I think with talent acquisition, I don't think they're given the ability to use the gut feel as much because it's very much, are you making the right hire? And when you look at founders that hire, they will go to gut feel a little bit more. And I think this is like giving more freedom because one is, if you're hiring to not make a wrong hire or you're hiring to make the hire that's going to make a difference, they're two fundamentally different philosophies. And so the thing about gut feel, and we do this within our platform, so we have, at first it's an audio, so audio comes through with the CV, but it's very much focused on how a candidate thinks, not what they've done. We then bring in a team panel screener because one of the other problems I see with the hiring process is it's very linear. And so a talent acquisition manager can find a candidate and have all of this information. Then it gets passed to the head of department. They're not consulted again. And I think this is completely wrong. And so what we do with our team panel screener is in 1 hour, you'll see 4 candidates, 4 hirers, and then you've got collective gut feel. So when somebody comes out and all 4 of my team have a bad gut feel, it's then about analyzing why that feeling exists in the first place. And so where everything goes linear, I generally think that this is something that we need to give more power to talent acquisition managers because what they should be focusing on is, am I getting the best talent? Because ultimately I could have a head of department who hires for their team. If that head of department moves to another company, I still have the people that they hired. And that's why I think, like for talent acquisition, it's making sure that I'm getting the right person that fits my brand, that fits my culture, that has the right skill set altogether. And I think it's because we've made it linear and it's almost not become collaborative. And I think it needs to be a lot more collaborative.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Like, are we optimizing to get that very narrow pipe and push things through it faster, or do we need to rethink the model of how we interact with the people that are in the process? You mentioned, okay, the role of AI is to, or at least the role of the moment, the opportunity of the moment is to really empower talent acquisition. How do you describe what that future looks like, especially when AI can do a lot of the screening, as you mentioned, and so forth? So what's your vision of how TA looks like?
So I might be a little bit controversial here when I've been looking at some of the other companies in the way that they focus, but I don't think an AI can measure social intelligence as well as a human. I don't, because the very nature of AI is that AI is very good at a certain type of thing that fits with efficiency. And so there was a study that was done where Harvard and Berkeley gave a business AI. And one of the interesting things that came out of it is that the top performers in the company, they got 15% better when working with AI. The worst performers in the company got 8% worse. And what MIT then investigated further is they gave a task to the best prompt engineers and also the people with the highest social intelligence. And even though the prompt engineers started off better, the task was completed better by the people with the highest social intelligence. And the reason this is because this is the bit that AI lacks. It doesn't understand the world. It's never been to a party. It's never made some of the mistakes that we've all made in the world or achievements. And so where AI is being used to make an analysis, to make a decision for a TA, I think this is wrong. And I actually think it's going to lead to some very bad hires. What we focus on is servicing the right quote so the TA makes the decision. So an example within my culture, because I'm a very innovation-focused company, I want my team to go and play, build something quickly, and test it. So a quote that will get served to me might be, what I like to do is do 2 months' worth of research before I open a design file. I instantly know from that quote that it's not the right person based on that. So I want to give the right data to the TAs to make the decision. I don't think AI can make a better decision than humans that have experience doing this for years and years and years, because it has no context of the outside world. The only context it has is humans on social media, which I'm sure everybody will agree isn't really representative of what humans are like.
Well, isn't X and Reddit the two biggest funnels for into the training data right now? So you imagine the people that are on X and Reddit typing away, and you think, hang on, these are the people feeding the artificial intelligence, and that's what the AI thinks is the world, based on how these people are typing their version of the world in there. It's not what it is. I mentioned it in my talk earlier this morning. Like, you walk out into the park there, you're not going to see words in the sky. AI is not embodied, and it's not evolved, and it's not enmeshed in social interaction. And we are, and that's our competitive advantage.
But the interesting part of it, though, is that, like, if we think of every company has the same AI subscription, then when I say the advantage is human, the very fact we need humans is because AI can't do something. So then how can we rely on AI to spot the thing that it can't see in the first place? And that's why we took the focus to serve the right data for the hiring manager to make the decision.
All right, so what is that right data then? So we're not looking at experience, we're not looking at self-report that the candidate has produced. What is the data that you're trying to surface this?
So look, we still do surface experience, and I think that it is there to make a decision. But really, you want to be looking at how people think. And so there's a question that I often get asked is, how do you stop people using AI in an interview? Because I think we've all seen that thing that pops up to give them the question. Now, I think this is funny because this only gives a candidate an advantage if we actually measure it based on being like an AI in the first place. And so what I think we've been trained to look for is polished answers. So you ask somebody a question, how would you market this product? Well, first of all, I'm going to define the personas, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that. And you go, great answer. But that's not how humans think. When you actually look at proper thinking, they'll go from one side, question themselves halfway through. And the one thing about AI, it doesn't really say, it depends. And so when candidates are using an AI answer, it becomes as an extremely convergent, polished answer. But that's not divergent thinking. Divergent thinking will have the ums, will have the questioning halfway through, will have the trade-offs between things. AI gives one answer very, very clearly, and that's why, one, I think it's easy to spot. And so I think we should change the way that we are reviewing answers rather than fight the battle of how to stop candidates from using AI.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, the problem with AI as well, it's very eager to please. So it doesn't like ambiguity because we've trained it to actually deliver the answer to us. And so, as you say, the output is going to be very conclusive. And the human beings are not that way. Like, we don't know what we're doing. And some of us like to admit that. Like, we're like, this is the reality of how it is. I'm still a little bit unclear, though, as to what the information the hiring manager gets.
Sure.
So once a candidate's gone through this process, like, what is the process, firstly?
Yeah. So a candidate will submit their CV along with an audio introduction to the hiring manager.
Right.
We then follow up with 3 questions. One is about past related to solving the future, not just the past. So it's how would you apply your past experience to solving a problem for your particular company. We then get them to go through a ways of working. We particularly ask how they would change their workflow now with AI, so we can understand the ways of working. And the last one is an open-ended visionary question. Because the thing is with asking open-ended questions is that anybody can answer an open-ended question, but only the best can do it really well. Because if I ask a question that has an answer, then if they know the answer, they give it me. And now I've got 20 people who all look the same. And so we focus on the open-ended. We then deliver a profile which will break it down by all the quotes and all the things that were said, that you can listen to the audio before you've even put them into an interview and get the exact quotes that are related to what you set up when you created the job. So you create what you're looking for, and then it's going to find the things the candidate has said that would be most valuable to you to make the decision.
Yeah, and basically it's it's an audio experience all the way through. So
Yeah.
candidate it needs to talk into a phone or talk into
Yeah.
a computer. That is then listened to by the hiring manager or the recruiter.
Yeah, and what it gives the candidates that I think is particularly valuable is a chance to have a voice to a hiring manager. So when I was talking about talent of the future, there's one thing that's I've always questioned this, where people will get screened out for a year gap year. And I think the idea of seeing multiple countries, multiple cultures, multiple ways of solving a problem isn't a bad thing. But I now have a voice to be able to communicate that. I have a voice to communicate why working in sales, then working in brand, then working in marketing will allow me to be able to be good in product because I've got these multiple dimensions. That's the voice that you can't get from a CV. And so if a candidate goes to one company that wasn't quite the right route, you don't actually get to see how they think or hear how they think. And so that's where we've focused on audio. Following that process, we then have the team panel screener, which is what I talked before, where it's 4 hirers, 4 candidates. And I'd like to tell a little story of how we use our team panel screener. So I'm not a big believer in asking questions, which might seem a little bit strange, but I found that it's quite easy to adapt when somebody's giving you a question to tell them what they want to hear. And so I like observation. So in the team panel screener, they'll turn up and they'll meet 4 of my team, and they just ask us questions. And so I'll give an example, and I am going to point him out. He's at the back. I promised I wouldn't, but I am. Juned. And when we interviewed for our FD, we let them ask questions. And when I got 9 out of the 10 candidates through, they all asked the same questions. How long's my runway? What's the working hours? What financial software am I going to use? Juned spent most of his time asking me about the product and most of his time asking me about the team. And so I asked him, why have you spent so much time on this? He said, well, I'm taking the point that the most expensive thing in your business is your product. The other most expensive thing is the team. Most people in this process can build a financial model. That's a skill you can learn. But the decisions that go into a financial model are what have the real impact. And when left to people's only devices, you get to observe where they default to, right? If I ask them, how important do you think understanding the product is to building a model, well, I can now adapt that. I can go, oh, okay, well, it is expensive because I've almost given them the answer in the question. So we do it very much based on observation. The last stage that we do is a lead the team. And so we then set a challenge that's set up through our app where I have an idea that I don't want to hire anybody that I wouldn't work for if they had a business. And so we get them to have a challenge, and they'll come in and they'll lead my team, including me, through a challenge. And again, I get to observe. I see some people who spend all their time on me because I'm the CEO. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who can quickly understand and work the team and get all the intelligence out of my amazing team together. And again, I'm leaving them to their own devices to observe.
I love that. Don't we love that, folks? Isn't that a really, really good idea? Instead of interviews being like an information extraction exercise, where you're literally interrogating this person, trying to drag stuff out of them, and they're performing to that.
Yeah.
Free it up and have them behave naturally, and then your skill is to observe, are they behaving in a way that I want to see in my business and in that role?
The point where I came up with this idea was quite interesting. I went for one of the hardest grad schemes to get in straight out of university, and it was for an area manager role. It was a good salary at the time. And I did really, really well through the interview process. And I got down to the last two. And then he said, if you could change anything in this company, what would it be? And I studied marketing. And I saw a massive thing they're missing. And I just went in so passionately. If you did this, there's a new opportunity there. There's a new opportunity. And he turned around to me and he said, look, I didn't think of this opportunity. I think that's an incredible answer. But I can tell you now, you are not an area manager. And he's correct. Because I was left to go where my passion was. And my passion was not being an area manager. Now, if he'd have asked me, what do you think is important, or what would you change in area management? Well, I'm going to give him an answer in the right area. So, yeah, I think it's quite a powerful tool.
Yeah, it's brilliant. There's a concept called optimizing for conversion, which I think we both do in interviews. So the candidate optimizes to convert a success. We optimize to try and get this guy through the pipeline or whatever it is. And we're basically both injecting bad information into a system and then hoping we get a good outcome.
Yeah.
And of course, there's no surprise that how many decades and man hours have we spent trying to get this right? It's because we're putting bad information in the system. Much better to try and observe and surface up the real information.
Hey, Hung?
Yes, mate.
We're almost out of time. I'd love to get at least one question if we have from the audience. I know you guys are on a roll, but would you mind if we throw it to the audience for a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll give one more question note to Tom before we finish.
Then we're done.
And then that's us done.
You greedy bastard.
Yeah, greedy this way. Well, I think Tom's just come up with loads of bullets today. I want to give him one more. So, if loads of TA, loads of hiring managers in the room here, what's the one sort of takeaway you'd give to the audience from your knowledge as a leader of a business, but also now building a recruitment product? What's one thing that they could do to improve getting the better signal in their hiring process?
I'm going to go back to it, but I'm going to say analyzing the gut more. It's why we're building a system around it. I don't think you should make what's called a gut feel hire, but I do think your instinct is there for a reason. I think TAs are incredible. I think they have amazing experience. I think we need to value them much more. And I would say instinct is there for a reason, and trust it more. It's just things like CV and qualifications are easier to validate. They're easier to put forward. They're easier to bring to your founder or bring to a CEO as to why you made a decision in the first place. My advice to founders would be trust TAs more, because they have way more experience in hiring than most other people in the team. And so that would be my probably advice to founders as well.
Brilliant stuff. Tom Stevenson, everybody, round of applause. That was brilliant. Could really continue the conversation here. Fantastic. Hello. And that's it. Thank you very much.
So good. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Hey.
Cheers, mate. I appreciate that. Thank you.